Hello, my name is Calvin Jones, and this is my lightning report. For my presentation, I will be talking about historically authentic da capo aria performance practice. And for my presentation, I will mostly be focusing on how to perform the da capo in a historically authentic way. Not to say that that is the best way, but this is the most accurate way according to methods and techniques from this time period, which are very hard to find because this tradition was mostly vocal and not passed down 300. Well, it was vocal, but not written down. And so 300 years later, it takes a lot of scholarship to find these practices. And so we are not even entirely sure if we have all of it, the information that we need. And for this presentation, I'll mostly be focusing on the Italian version of singing, which is completely different than the traditions of the German and French singers. There's a lot more improvisation involved. So let's get into it. My thesis for my paper was that historically informed da capo arias necessitate Baroque techniques of correct placement and correct ornamentation execution. Without these things, this piece will sound out of place in the opera and not in keeping with the style of the Baroque time period. And so there's two things to really talk about here. One is that placement is a huge deal, and especially with the cadenza. The cadenza is a section where the singer can add a lot of melodic or intervallic material that is ornamented and very showcasey of what the performer can do. It's not written down and it comes on the dominant right before the last tonic progression. And this is a moment for the singer to shine and to really embellish what is happening in the opera and to make the composer's music even more brilliant and grand or beautiful. For the purposes of my paper, I chose to use the da capo aria La Giustizia from Handel's Julius Caesar opera. And this da capo aria is a classic form of what a da capo aria should be. And in measure 38, we have a place for the cadenza right here, dominant to tonic. So that's where we could place a cadenza on that recap. Ornaments include cadential trills, vibrato, and trillo. These are things that the singer can add to make the recap more interesting than the beginning, because in this time period, when the recap came, it was up to the singer to embellish and make the melody even grander than what the composer had intended, or more beautiful, however the piece needed it to be. Cadential trills are self-explanatory. For example, in 38, you can add a trill right here, right before the tonic. It's usually to spice up the common dominant to tonic relationships. So it's there in 38, also here in 26 when there's another dominant to tonic. It's not written out, but the singer can pretty much imply that they can do a trill there to make it more interesting. Vibrato is very important. It's also thought of as an ornament. And so excessive vibrato should only be used in very specific words. La justicia, the word that means justice, can use it in the middle syllable, which would accent that word a lot more and give contrast. Trillos are pretty tricky. They're only done by really experienced singers. Not everybody in the Baroque time period could do it, where a pitch is sung and rapid breathing to make it sound like a trill, but only on one pitch. And it can also be done at the cadenza to showcase skills. Faustina Bordoni was a famous singer. Here's an example of how she ornamented her pieces. Notice how she doesn't go outside of the range of the original melody. And then moving on to this next spot. Anachronisms, if you go outside of the range of the original piece, then that's a problem, and don't use too much vibrato. So my conclusion is if you use these performance practices and techniques of correctly placing ornaments and cadenzas and executing them correctly, one can perform a historically authentic da capo aria. Thank you for listening to my presentation.